The certified letter demanding $250,000 showed up the same day I buried my father, and if Karen Whitmore planned it that way, she couldn't have timed it any crueler. I was still standing in my driveway in a black funeral suit, red cemetery dirt stuck to my shoes, when she floated across the street, smelling like expensive flowers and bad intentions. She pressed the envelope into my hand, gave me that fake little sympathy smile, and said, "I'm sorry for your loss, Marcus. But business is business," and that was the moment she signed the papers for her own downfall. My name's Marcus Castellano. I'm 42, a third-generation contractor, recently divorced and stubborn enough to be a problem. The land she was trying to take had belonged to my family since 1952 when my grandfather Antonio bought 3 acres for $800 cash back when the whole area was cornfields and pasture. The house is just an old ranch, but the workshop behind it is sacred. My grandfather built it, my father kept it going, and lately I'd been teaching my daughter Emma how to use those same old tools in that same warm cloud of sawdust and oil. That land wasn't property to me, it was memory. Everything around us changed in 2003 when a developer bought the farmland around our place and built Willowbrook Estates, 47 polished suburban homes wrapped around my family's land like a belt pulled too tight. My grandfather refused to sell, then my father refused, and over time our workshop became the thing the new neighbors loved to complain about. Not because it was illegal, it wasn't, because it reminded them something real had been there before their tidy little dream showed up. Karen Whitmore turned that resentment into a mission. She was always overdressed, overperfumed, and overconfident, the kind of woman who used words like community standards when she really meant control. At first it was petty. Noise complaints because I started work at 7 even though the city allowed construction at 6. Letters about visual blight because she didn't like seeing equipment on my own property. Inspectors showing up because she kept calling them, they never found a thing. Then she escalated. The HOA started sending legal notices saying my workshop violated neighborhood covenants. My shed was unauthorized. My business hurt property values and I owed fines and immediate compliance. Never mind that my family had owned that land 51 years before Willowbrook existed. Never mind that we had never joined their HOA. Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about pressure. And on the day I buried my father, she decided pressure would finally break me. That night I went into my father's office, still smelling his Old Spice in the air, and started opening file drawers. My dad kept everything: tax records, receipts, survey notes, old deeds. Around midnight, I found the original 1952 deed with my grandfather's signature and the county seal still clear on the page. I sat there under that buzzing desk lamp and realized Karen had made her first fatal mistake. Our property was never part of the HOA. Not on paper, not in law, not in any world that mattered. Karen held a neighborhood safety meeting instead, posted photos of my workshop online like I was running a hazardous waste site, gathered a little crowd of concerned residents, and dressed her harassment up as civic duty. So I stopped reacting and started building. I hired a property rights attorney named Rebecca Santos, smart, calm, and lethal with paperwork. I installed cameras around my property. I saved every letter, every complaint, every lie. And while Karen strutted around acting like she was one vote away from taking my land, I started digging through county records. The recorder's office basement smelled like dust-damp paper and old fluorescent lights. I spent night after night down there, going through plats, surveys, easements, and tax maps. And buried in those records was a mistake so big I actually laughed when I saw it. The developer had surveyed the boundary wrong, enough that part of my family's property had been folded into Willowbrook's plans, even though they never owned it. Enough that the HOA playground sat on my land. Enough that several backyards crossed the line. Enough that Karen's gazebo was over by 8 feet. And the real prize, the road access for a big chunk of the neighborhood, crossed land my family still legally owned. Karen thought she was bullying a grieving contractor with an old workshop. She had no idea she'd picked a fight with the man who technically owned part of her neighborhood. Tucked in an old county file was a 1953 agreement giving my grandfather exclusive rights to the natural spring feeding the whole area's irrigation and retention pond. Their perfect little neighborhood had been sipping from my family's water for years without permission. I kept that to myself, because leverage works better when it arrives all at once. Meanwhile, Karen kept escalating. More legal threats, more complaints, more agencies. Zoning came out, fire came out, health department came out. Even the EPA came out after she filed some dramatic report about diesel contamination. And every single time they found the same thing: my operation was legal, clean, and compliant. Karen got so mad she started accusing inspectors of corruption, which was about the point. Even neutral people started realizing this woman had lost the plot. Then she made another mistake. She called Channel 8. Karen thought they'd show up and film me as some dangerous operator ruining suburban peace. Instead, the reporter listened, looked at my permits, read the deed, and aired a segment about HOA overreach and property rights. That story cracked Karen's support. Rebecca and I then pulled HOA financial records and found out Karen had spent tens of thousands of neighborhood dollars chasing me: legal fees, consultants, filing costs, all buried in vague budget lines while dues kept rising. But the twist that really blew the door off Karen: hadn't even been legally eligible to serve as HOA president when she took office. The bylaws required 10 years of residency. She'd only been there 8. Every action she'd pushed, every threat she'd signed off on, every assessment tied to her war against me, all of it suddenly looked shaky as hell. And then her husband decided to commit vandalism on camera. At 2:17 one Tuesday morning, my security system caught Dale Whitmore slashing my truck tires and spray painting "Move" across my workshop door. Clear footage, clear face, clear arrest by breakfast. Karen called it community self-defense, which tells you everything you need to know about her. After that, everything started collapsing fast. Board members resigned. Neighbors stopped backing her. One of her allies got caught dumping construction debris on my land to fake an environmental violation. A councilman reported Karen after she tried leaning on him to pressure city officials. And the more she panicked, the more evidence she created for Rebecca. Then came the part nobody talks about when the tables turn. Rebecca laid out the nuclear option in plain English. I could force title actions, demand back rent for unauthorized land use, use the water rights as leverage, and make the entire neighborhood bleed money for what Karen started. Legally, I could have done it. Part of me wanted to. She'd tried to weaponize my father's funeral. My daughter had watched me get harassed in my own home. Every angry part of me wanted to drop the hammer and let the whole place burn. But one night I was standing in the workshop, hand on my grandfather's scarred old workbench, and I had this realization: people who live for control want to pull you into their kind of victory. They want you cruel. They want you consumed. And if you're not careful, being right turns into becoming them. That was the lesson my father would have wanted me to learn. Power doesn't just reveal your enemy, it reveals you. So when the emergency town hall came, I walked in with one manila folder and 70 years of proof, and I kept my voice steady. Karen went first, talking louder than facts, accusing me of threatening the community, hurting families, ruining property values. Then I stepped up and laid it out piece by piece: the original deed, the corrected surveys, the encroachments, the water rights, the HOA, spending, the bylaw violation, the harassment timeline. And then I said the one thing nobody expected. I told them I could make this a disaster for every one of you tomorrow morning. But I'm not going to. I'll sign fair easement agreements, formalize the water use, settle the boundaries, and move forward like adults. I want respect, not revenge. That was the kill shot. Karen didn't lose because I exposed her. She lost because the whole room saw the difference between authority and character. I had the power to destroy people who'd stood against me, and I chose not to. She had a little power, and she used it to torment whoever she could. The applause started in the back and rolled through that auditorium like thunder. Karen lunged for the microphone, screaming about conspiracies and corruption, voice climbing higher and higher until security had to walk her out while she was still shouting. 6 weeks later, the new HOA board signed a settlement. Formal easements, water use licensing, clear title corrections, compensation for the land use, insurance problems resolved, mortgage issues lifted. The whole thing ended with $85,000 paid out and a neighborhood finally forced to act like neighbors. Karen got fines, probation, community service, and humiliation so complete I almost felt sorry for her. She sold her house at a loss and disappeared. Dale divorced her. The new board rewrote the bylaws, put hard limits on spending, and added real oversight so nobody could ever pull this stunt again. And that first summer after it was over, we held the neighborhood barbecue in my backyard. Emma helped me grill burgers. Kids ran across the grass. People who hadn't spoken in months laughed together under string lights where there'd been shouting not long before. That was the real win. Not the money, not the headlines, not even watching Karen crash and burn. It was standing in my workshop afterward, evening light cutting through the dust, hearing my daughter laugh outside and knowing my father and grandfather had built something stronger than lumber and concrete. They built a line in the dirt that said, "This far, no farther." So yeah, the woman who tried to steal my family's land on the day I buried my father ended up losing her power, her reputation, her marriage, and the neighborhood she thought she ruled. Karma took its time, but when it finally showed up, it came carrying documents. Now I'm curious what you think. Was I right to stop at justice and spare the rest of the neighborhood, or would you have gone all the way and used every legal weapon on the table? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA bully, a power-hungry board, or a neighbor who thought they ran your life, tell me your story in the comments.